wake before sunrise, and the first problem is not today's plan. It's whether yesterday's heat is still alive under the ash. If the night kept your shelter, heat, and containers intact, morning starts in minutes. If not, the fire has to be rebuilt. Water waits, breakfast gets pushed back. The strange part is how familiar this already was. 10,000 years ago, dawn already used tools and setup. You were not on random ground under a vague pile of branches. The best preserved homes from deep prehistory look organized, deliberately organized. Sleeping space at the edge, working space in the middle, heat at the center. 23,000 years ago, at Ohalo II by the Sea of Galilee, one brush hut was preserved. It is unusually clear. The hearth sat in the middle. Grass bedding ran around the walls. The grass was bound with clay. It was laid in a repeated pattern, almost like tiles. The center stayed clear. So you wake with your body against the wall, not sprawled wherever you fell. Your feet land beside a space already meant for work. A home at dawn only works if the zones survived the night. Bedding has to stay dry. Smoke can't hang low in the room. The middle has to stay usable. It can't turn into mud and junk. Home already meant upkeep. It meant keeping bedding dry, keeping the hearth usable, and leaving the room ready for dawn. Then, your attention goes straight to the gray pile in the center. Not to admire it, to check whether it still works. A used hearth does not behave like a one-off campfire. Fresh ash is flimsy stuff. It is mostly air. Step on it and it collapses. Brush it or cover it lightly and it turns to powder. Repeated fire does something else. The ash bakes into a tougher crust. That crust forms when the same hearth is used again and again. Repeated relighting leaves a crust, and one thin ash layer can represent dozens of fires in the same place. A thicker sequence can stand for hundreds in the same place. So when you prod the surface at dawn, you are not looking at dead dust. You are checking yesterday's work. Maybe there is still warmth under the pale top layer. Maybe there's a coal hiding in there, still barely alive. Ethnographic fire traces show this split clearly. Sleeping fires leave one kind of mark. Fresh cooking fires leave another. Among the Hadza, overnight fires leave the trampled floor still visible underneath. Cooking fires show more ash scooping and cleanup. Even in the dirt, the morning question is visible. Did the fire survive, or do you have to do all the work again? And if the answer is no, dawn gets expensive very fast. Now the ash is cold, the tinder is damp. Your hands are busy before breakfast exists. Starting a fire without live coals is not some noble movie moment.
It is fiddly, slow work with a real failure rate. You need dry fluff first, then kindling, then fuel that catches fast enough to help instead of sitting there wet and useless. People kept tinder, kindling, and fast-catching fuel ready for a reason. Restarting from cold was slow. Making heat from scratch slows everything down. If the hearth dies, warm water waits, food waits, light waits, everybody waits. The traces in old fire floors point the same way. People treated keeping a fire alive differently from building a fresh one because those are different problems. One keeps the morning moving, the other makes you start the whole job over with cold hands. And heat alone still doesn't rescue the morning. You also need water and the things already waiting to hold it. A usable dawn depends on reach, not heroic effort. Reach. You want fuel near the hearth. You want stones where they were left. You want baskets, skins, pits, or other containers ready from yesterday. The worst version of mourning is hunting for every object while you're still cold. Around 11,000 years ago, at WF16 in southern Jordan, households were more than one shelter. The site has separate domestic and processing spaces. The house has different areas for sleeping, storage, and work, so tools and food are already where you need them. Part of the house is for living, part is for handling food and materials. You are not inventing a room every sunrise. Earlier sites show the same habit. Around 20,000 years ago, at Kharaneh IV in eastern Jordan, people returned to the same domestic spaces again and again. Huts, layers, caches, the exact opposite of a life rebuilt from zero every morning. Even when groups moved by season, they still made places that kept their shape, memory, and stuff. Leaving the kettle out feels modern until you see the older version. Stacking wood where your hand expects it, keeping a bowl where you can grab it half awake. None of that is fussy, it is ancient. Then the house starts doing the small jobs that become breakfast. You warm something, you parch grain or seeds, you grind material that stayed dry overnight, you heat water if you have it, you get bodies moving, you get tools easy to touch, you make the first edible thing that proves the household is working again. Ohalo II helps here too. The hut preserved sleeping and working zones around the hearth. That is exactly the layout you would expect if morning processing happened right there. You wake at the wall. You reach the hearth in the middle. Work starts there. Even breakfast is about keeping things going. A warm mouthful in the first light means the bedding held, the fuel stayed dry, the stones stayed put, and something edible made it through the night with you. Tiny miracle, repeated daily.
Then the whole thing tilts from cozy to precarious. An ordinary dawn was only ordinary because the house had not failed yet. Damp fuel can wreck the fire. Dead embers can turn 10 easy minutes into a long, cold job. Smoke can shift and make the room miserable before the day even starts. In rock shelter models, smoke builds fast when too many hearths burn at once. Some interior zones only work for quick tasks, not for sitting there and living. So hearth placement matters. Which fires are lit matters. Where you sleep matters. A bad morning smoke is not atmospheric. It is your house briefly trying to force you out. Nudathian houses at Eynan in Israel make the point in stone. These partly sunken houses rebuilt their hearths in the same spots again and again. Same area, same heat logic, same domestic center, kept up again and again. People kept returning to the same answer because it worked, until it didn't. The honest answer is simple. Nobody can prove every household banked embers the same way every night. Nobody can prove every group lived with the same permanence either. Open camps, rock shelters, and early villages did not all behave identically. Preservation bends the picture a little too. Protected hearths survive better than flimsy ones out in the open. So this is the best reading of the clearest cases. It is not a universal script for every place and season, but the pattern in the best preserved homes is hard to miss. 23,000 years ago at Ohalo II, one small house preserved clay-bound grass bedding around the perimeter. A hearth sat in a cleared center. Not everywhere, precisely there. Sleep at the edge, heat in the middle. Open working room between them. Yesterday physically set things up so today can begin. The hut preserves bedding at the edge. It keeps a clear floor in the middle. The hearth is ready to be uncovered at dawn. The most important thing in the room is not the flame you can see. It is the heat that lasted long enough to use again. It is the space that stayed organized. It is the fuel, the bedding, the container, the floor, all quietly doing their part before sunrise. So if you had to lose one modern morning appliance first, which one fails you fastest? The heater, the kettle, the stove, or running water? Because once you see this hut clearly, primitive morning stops sounding primitive at all. So when you wake up and the room is already warm, that is not natural. The water is already there. The kitchen is already waiting. You are inheriting stored heat. Yesterday left stored order behind. You are inheriting yesterday's house. And 10,000 years ago, the first modern appliance was already glowing under the ash.